I still remember the exact moment I knew I had to leave. It was a Tuesday morning, 8:37 a.m. I was sitting at my desk, third cubicle from the left, second floor, right under that flickering fluorescent light that management never got around to fixing. My coffee was cold, my inbox was overflowing, and I had just gotten my paycheck notification. I opened it, staring at the number like I was seeing it for the first time. It was the same as always, barely enough to cover rent, utilities, and the cheapest groceries I could find. I didn't even bother checking the breakdown anymore. There were no bonuses, no raises, just a number that somehow stayed the same no matter how many extra hours I put in. I had worked at that company for nearly 5 years. I was there before they rebranded, before the second location, before the quarterly town halls that became monthly lectures on leaner operations. I gave everything I had, early mornings, late nights, weekends. I missed weddings. I skipped family dinners. I canceled vacations. For what? So the CEO could talk about employee empowerment while driving off in his brand new Mercedes? I wasn't bitter. Not then. I was exhausted. There's a difference. And that day, sitting under that damn light, reading yet another email about tightening belts while they hired another VP for culture strategy, I just broke. It wasn't one big event. It was death by 1,000 cuts. My ideas were overlooked. My team was burned out. Promotions were given to whoever talked the loudest, not worked the hardest. I had become invisible in a job I used to love. But here's the thing, I didn't hate the work. I hated how little it valued me. That morning I stood up, quietly. No big drama. I walked into my manager's office. I handed in my resignation letter, already printed and folded in my backpack for months. He looked at me like I had just confessed to a crime. "You sure about this?" he asked. "You don't even have another offer." "I'm sure," I said. And I was. I didn't have a safety net. I didn't have savings. I didn't even have a plan. All I had was this voice in my head saying, "If you don't leave now, you never will." And I knew that voice was right. That day, I walked away from a job that no longer served me. I walked away from a salary that kept me stuck. I walked away from a version of myself that had grown small to fit into someone else's idea of success. What I didn't know then was that this breaking point would become the turning point. And it would change everything. Leaving the job was terrifying. But what was even more terrifying was realizing just how broken my finances were, even while I had that job. You see, when people say, "At least you have a steady paycheck," it sounds like security. But my paycheck wasn't security, it was survival. Barely. I was living month to month, paycheck to paycheck, and sometimes I didn't even make it to the end of the month without swiping a credit card I couldn't pay off. Let me paint the picture for you. Rent, $1,300. Utilities, $160. Student loans, $300. Transportation, $150. Groceries, $250. Phone, internet, insurance, all the other little life things. Another $300 easy. My take-home pay after taxes? Just under $2,600. Do the math. I was left with what? Maybe $100. On a good month. And that's if nothing broke. No car trouble, no doctor visits, no birthdays, no holidays, no emergencies. And yet, I was working 50+ hours a week. I was managing projects, training new hires, covering for team members who quit. I was doing the job of 3 people and still couldn't afford a single weekend getaway or a nice dinner without guilt. It wasn't just me either. Everyone around me was struggling. We joke about payday joy, but it always came with a sigh because we knew it meant catching up on overdue bills, not treating ourselves. We bring lunch from home not for health, but because $11 sandwiches downtown were a luxury. And we all knew the raise that was coming next quarter would never arrive. I started to realize something deeply unsettling. They were never going to pay me what I was worth. Not because I wasn't good at my job, but because they didn't have to. I was replaceable. That's how they saw me. That's how most companies see most employees. And I had accepted that for far too long. Quitting didn't magically fix my money problems. In fact, it made them worse, at least in the beginning. But weirdly, it also gave me a kind of clarity I'd never had before. For the first time, I wasn't staring at a glass ceiling. I was staring at a blank page. And that blank page scared the hell out of me, but it also gave me something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility. I didn't know how I was going to earn money. But I knew this. Whatever came next had to be something where I decided my value. Not someone else. And for the first time, that felt like real power. I started at the company when I was 24. Fresh out of college, hungry to prove myself, excited just to have a desk and a badge with my name on it. I showed up early, stayed late, volunteered for everything. Didn't ask questions. Didn't say no. In those early years, I believed in the idea that hard work would be seen. That someone up there was watching and would eventually say, "This one deserves more." I believed in loyalty. I thought it meant something. And for a while, it felt like it did. I got thank you emails. I was called a team player. I was even asked to help onboard new hires, which felt like a small promotion, even though it came with no raise, no title change, and way more work. But I told myself, it's a step. Keep going. So I did. I worked through holidays. I covered for sick coworkers. I stayed when entire departments were laid off and told, "We're counting on you." Year after year, I gave more and more. But the recognition, the raises, the actual advancement, nothing. At first, I made excuses for them. Well, the company is still growing. Maybe next quarter. They're under a lot of pressure. It's just not the right time. Until one day I realized I had been saying that for 4 years. 4 years of skipping life events for a job that wouldn't even approve a 50 cents hourly raise. 4 years of giving everything to a company that couldn't remember my birthday but always remembered to ask for last-minute work on Friday evenings. And the worst part, people around me were getting promoted. Not the hardest workers. Not the ones who cared. But the ones who played the game. The ones who took credit. Who talked more than they listened. Who looked good in meetings even if they didn't actually do anything. I wasn't angry at them. I was angry at myself. Because I finally realized that loyalty in a broken system isn't noble. It's dangerous. I had confused being a good employee with being a quiet one. I thought loyalty meant patience, sacrifice, and staying in line. But in their eyes, it just meant I was someone who would never ask for more. That hit me hard. It made me question every year I spent there. Every extra hour. Every missed moment with friends and family. All for a company that saw me as just part of the furniture. So when people asked why I left so suddenly, I just smiled. Because to them it seemed sudden. But to me, it was 5 years in the making. If you've ever worked in corporate, you know about those meetings. The ones that are supposed to be about strategy but end up being 2 hours of vague charts, buzzwords, and half-hearted applause for someone else's success. Most of the time, I could tune them out, fake a smile, take notes, and go back to my real work. But this one was different. It was a Monday morning. The start of Q4. Everyone looked tired. The coffee machine was broken again. We all shuffled into the conference room, pretending to be energized while clutching notebooks we didn't plan to use. Then the VP of Operations walked in with that over-rehearsed grin and launched into his usual speech about growth mindset and team alignment. I remember exactly what he said next, because it made my stomach turn. We're asking everyone to go above and beyond this quarter. We're not issuing raises or bonuses this year, but if we all pull together, we can still hit our targets. The room was silent. Not shocked, just tired. We'd heard it before. But what he said after that was the moment I snapped. Remember, no one's here for the money. We're here to build something bigger than ourselves. I laughed. Out loud. Not a chuckle. A sharp, dry, unplanned laugh that echoed across the room like a dropped plate in a church. Everyone turned to look at me. Some with wide eyes. Some with smirks. Some pretending not to have heard. I could feel my boss's stare burning into the side of my face. And I just said, "Sorry." That line just hit me differently today. He moved on quickly, like it didn't happen. But something inside me had shifted. Permanently. I realized in that moment that they really believed their own nonsense. They actually thought that passion pays the rent. That being part of something bigger can cover your hospital bills. That we should be grateful just to be there, underpaid, overworked, invisible. That moment wasn't loud. There was no outburst. I didn't flip a table or storm out. But internally, something collapsed. Like a final support beam giving way. And what rushed in to replace it was clarity. I was done. Done waiting for people to notice my value. Done pretending that exposure was compensation. Done giving my energy to a company that weaponized loyalty and romanticized burnout. That meeting didn't end with applause. It ended with me making a decision. I went back to my desk, opened a blank Word doc, and typed, "Dear manager's name, please accept this letter as formal notice of resignation." I didn't send it that day, but I would, very soon. And once I did, everything in my life began to change. 2 weeks. That's how much notice I gave. Not because I owed them anything, but because I wanted to leave on my own terms. Those final 2 weeks were strange. Surreal, almost. Suddenly, people I barely spoke to were stopping by my desk. "Wait, you're actually leaving. Where are you going? Did you get a better offer?" When I told them no, that I didn't have anything lined up yet, most of them just blinked. "You're just quitting?" "Yep." Just like that. Some admired it. Quietly. You could see it in their eyes, the ones who'd been wanting to do the same for years but never did. Others were confused. A few tried to talk me out of it. My manager even pulled me aside and said, "You're making a mistake. It's tough out there." I smiled. "Yeah, it's tough in here, too." On my last day, I cleared out my drawer in under 10 minutes. There wasn't much. A few pens, some old notebooks, a sticky note with a quote I used to believe in. I tossed most of it in the trash. I walked through the office slowly, soaking it all in, not sentimentally, but deliberately. The sound of clicking keyboards, the fake plants no one watered, the endless white walls, the smell of burnt coffee. I passed by the conference rooms where I had sat for countless hours, giving input that was ignored, taking notes on someone else's bad idea, listening to pep talks that felt more like sales pitches. I said goodbye to a few close coworkers. Real ones. The ones who shared snacks and gave honest feedback and helped me laugh through the worst days. We didn't say goodbye forever. Just keep in touch. And we meant it. When I handed in my ID badge and laptop, something unexpected happened. I felt light. Not scared. Not regretful. Just free. I stepped out of that building, and the air felt different. Brighter. Colder. Realer. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a plan. I had bills due in 2 weeks, and no idea how I was going to pay them. But I also had something I hadn't felt in years. Myself. Unfiltered. Unbranded. Unboxed. I wasn't a title anymore. I wasn't a cog in a machine. I was just me. Broke. Yes. Exhausted. Definitely. But I was free. And that freedom, terrifying as it was, became the foundation for everything I would build next. I didn't know it then, but I was about to discover what I was truly capable of when no one else was telling me who to be. There's a kind of silence that hits you after you leave a job. At first, it feels like relief. No more alarm clock, no morning meetings, no fake smiles. But after a few days, that silence turns into something heavier. You start asking yourself hard questions. What now? What did I just do? Am I crazy? I had no savings. I wasn't one of those people who quit their job after stacking a 6-month emergency fund or planning a dream business. I had rent due in 12 days and just over $400 in my account. The first week was a blur. I slept in. I binge-watched shows. I reorganized drawers I hadn't opened in years. But that was just noise, distraction. Underneath it all, I could feel panic quietly rising. Then, on the morning of day 8, I got out of bed, sat at my tiny kitchen table, and made a list titled, "What can I do today to make money?" It wasn't glamorous. I wrote down every skill I had: writing, editing, project management, copywriting, basic graphic design. I scoured freelance websites, Craigslist, LinkedIn. I even messaged old classmates and coworkers I hadn't spoken to in years. Most of them left me on read. Some said they'd keep me in mind. A couple tossed me small gigs, nothing major, but it was enough to feel like I was moving. I did whatever I could find. Proofreading blog posts, designing flyers for local businesses, fixing up resumes. One weekend, I helped someone set up their Shopify store for $75 and a pizza. It wasn't steady. It wasn't impressive. But it was mine. Every dollar I made came from me. Not a job title. Not a corporate account. Just effort, sweat, and stubborn belief that I could figure it out. Some nights I went to bed anxious, wondering how long I could keep this up. Other nights, I went to bed proud, because even if I was broke, I wasn't stuck anymore. And there was something else. I started noticing how much I had been conditioned to underestimate myself. I had spent years being told what I was worth, that my time was worth $18 an hour, that my creativity only mattered if it was on brand, that I needed permission to take initiative. Now, I was rewriting all of that. Grit became my currency, and survival became strategy. I wasn't chasing a dream yet. I wasn't building a company, but I was doing something harder, starting from absolutely nothing. And it forced me to look inward, to rely on instincts I didn't know I had. People say, just take the leap. They never tell you what the fall feels like. I'll tell you, it's fast, it's loud, and it's lonely. But if you don't panic, if you let the wind carry you instead of fighting it, something amazing starts to happen. You stop falling, and you start flying. People love to romanticize the early grind, the hustle, the struggle, paying your dues. But let me tell you something they don't post on LinkedIn. Sleeping on a friend's couch for 2 months doesn't feel inspirational. It feels humiliating. After the first few freelance gigs, the money slowed. I wasn't making enough to cover rent, so I gave up my apartment before I missed a payment and messed up my credit. Luckily, my friend Nate had a pull-out couch and a soft spot for struggling underdogs. Stay as long as you need, he said. I nodded, but deep down, I promised myself I wouldn't be there long. I stuffed my life into 2 duffel bags. One had clothes. The other had my laptop, chargers, and a notebook full of half-baked ideas that fell further away with every sleepless night. The couch wasn't uncomfortable, but my thoughts were. I spent every day online, scouring freelance platforms, applying to anything that remotely matched my skills. Writing product descriptions, editing cover letters, designing cheap logos for $25. I said yes to everything, even the gigs that paid pennies, just to build a profile. Every night, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, listening to Nate snore from the next room, asking myself the same question. What am I doing? I wasn't building anything yet. I was surviving. And survival, day after day, wears you down. But somewhere in that blur of exhaustion, I found something deeper than confidence. Conviction. I was broke. I was exhausted. I was technically homeless. But I was also free. I didn't have to ask permission anymore. I didn't have to fake enthusiasm in meetings, or justify why I deserved a raise. I was working for myself, even if that self was barely scraping by. And little by little, something started to shift. Clients started coming back. Referrals started trickling in. My $25 logos became $100, then $250, then more. I learned how to pitch, how to negotiate, how to say no to bad deals and yes to scary ones. But it all started from that couch, with Wi-Fi that cut out when the microwave ran. No office, no investors, no safety net, just a laptop, a dream I hadn't fully figured out yet, and a refusal to go back to the life I left behind. Those sleepless nights, they were awful, but they taught me something I carry to this day. You don't need comfort to grow. You need hunger. And I was starving for purpose, for freedom, for something that was mine. That hunger would drive me to the next level, even if I didn't know yet what that level looked like. It started with a scribble in the corner of my notebook. Just 5 words. They don't train their people. That line had been bouncing around in my head ever since I left my old job. It was something I had seen over and over again. Companies hiring fast, promoting faster, but never really teaching anyone how to lead, communicate, or collaborate. It wasn't just bad management. It was a complete lack of people development. I had experienced it firsthand. No onboarding, no coaching, no feedback unless something went wrong. And it wasn't just my old company. As I freelanced and spoke to more business owners, I saw it everywhere. Small businesses, startups, even Fortune 500s. Great products, strong marketing, solid growth, but internally, total chaos. The problem was obvious. But here's what hit me. I might actually know how to fix it. I wasn't a licensed consultant. I didn't have an MBA. But I had spent 5 years in the trenches, leading teams, managing projects, navigating dysfunctional communication, and fixing broken workflows with duct tape and late nights. I understood people. I understood process. And I understood pain because I had lived it. One night, I was sitting on the couch, scrolling past another job listing I had no interest in applying for, when the thought hit me. What if instead of working for companies, I helped fix them? Not in a guru, TED Talk kind of way, but practically, quietly, behind the scenes, training team leads, setting up onboarding systems, teaching basic human leadership, the kind people actually use, not just put on PowerPoint slides. It sounded crazy at first. Who would hire me? I didn't have a company. I wasn't official, but the idea wouldn't leave me alone. For days, I thought about it. I started mapping out possible services. I listed everything I wished my former job had done better: structured onboarding, real-time feedback, soft skills training, performance review systems that meant something. Everywhere I looked, I saw opportunity. I didn't need to build a tech platform or launch an app. I just needed to help people help their people. The idea was simple: train the people, strengthen the company. That was it. And the more I thought about it, the more it felt like not just a business, but a mission. A way to take everything I'd learned the hard way and turn it into something useful. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't scalable at light speed. But it was real, needed, and most importantly, it was mine. That was the moment I stopped looking for a job and started building a solution. The moment I decided to turn my idea into a real business, I did what most people do. I Googled how to start a consulting business. That single search led me down a rabbit hole of articles, videos, courses, and checklists. Write a business plan. Register your LLC. Build a website. Create a logo. Choose a niche. Set your pricing. Market your offer. It felt like trying to build a spaceship with IKEA instructions written in 5 different languages. Still, I dove in. I bought a domain name. Spent 3 days trying to design my own logo. It looked terrible. I pieced together a 1-page website. I posted about my new consulting business on LinkedIn like I had it all figured out. Spoiler alert, I didn't. My first offer was a confusing mix of team training, leadership coaching, onboarding design, and productivity consulting. I tried to be everything for everyone, which, of course, meant I was valuable to no one. Crickets. No emails. No clients. Not even polite rejections. Just silence. I remember sitting at a coffee shop, refreshing my inbox like it owed me money. I had launched this idea with so much energy and belief, and I was already crashing. But here's what saved me. I didn't treat failure like proof I wasn't good enough. I treated it like data. So I asked myself, what exactly did I get wrong? And the answers were obvious. My message was unclear. My services were too broad. I wasn't solving a specific, painful problem. And worst of all, I was hiding behind a screen, expecting strangers to trust me out of nowhere. So I made a decision that changed everything. I stopped trying to sell, and I started trying to help. I rewrote my offer. Instead of marketing consulting, I focused on one core problem. Your team isn't performing well because they've never been trained to lead. Then I reached out to 5 people I knew in small businesses, former coworkers, old college connections, that guy I met once at a networking event and never followed up with. I didn't pitch. I asked questions. What's your biggest issue with your team right now? What's something no one taught you when you became a manager? If you could fix one people problem in your company, what would it be? Those conversations taught me more than any blog post or business book ever could. They showed me where the real pain points were. And slowly, opportunities started to emerge. A small company let me run a 2-hour training. Another asked for help rebuilding their onboarding doc. One client paid me $500 to coach 2 of their new team leads. Nothing huge, but real. Real money, real problems, real impact, and most importantly, real feedback. I failed fast, but I learned faster. Not just about business, but about people, value, and the power of showing up with clarity over perfection. This wasn't just a business idea anymore. It was a path, and I was finally walking it with direction. After those initial stumbles, something shifted. I realized that this wasn't just about landing clients. It was about leveraging what I already had and turning it into something sustainable. My skills weren't flashy. I wasn't a marketing genius or a tech wizard. I was just a person who had spent years solving problems, managing projects, and talking to people. That was enough. So I started small. I created simple packages, training sessions for team leads, onboarding checklists, and coaching calls. Nothing fancy, just clear, straightforward help. I spent evenings tweaking presentations, building templates, and practicing what I'd say in front of a mirror. It felt awkward, like starting high school all over again. But it was exciting. I leaned on my network, emailing former coworkers, classmates, and connections I'd made while freelancing. I wasn't pushy. I just asked if they knew anyone who might need a little help with their teams. Slowly, word spread. One client led to another. Referrals started trickling in. I even got a few testimonials that boosted my confidence more than any course ever could. This side hustle was far from perfect. There were late nights, last-minute calls, and moments when I doubted myself. But every small success made it easier to keep going. I also learned how to say no, because not every opportunity was worth my time or energy. And here's the thing about starting small. It gave me space to experiment, fail, and improve without risking everything. That hustle didn't pay my rent yet, but it was building momentum. More importantly, it was reminding me who I was outside of a cubicle and a paycheck. I was a problem solver, a helper, a leader in the making. That's when I realized this wasn't just a fallback plan. It was a future. And the best part, I was in control. Just when things started to feel like they were picking up, life threw me a curveball. I got a call from an old contact, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, offering me a chance to work on a big project. It was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd been hoping for. A chance to scale, make real money, and prove myself. Only one problem, I wasn't ready. My side hustle was still small. My processes were messy. I didn't have a team, a formal business structure, or even a solid contract template. The offer was exciting and terrifying. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. Part of me wanted to run in the other direction. I spent nights wrestling with doubt. What if I failed? What if I let this person down? What if I wasn't actually qualified? But I also knew that waiting for ready meant waiting forever. So I did something that felt both reckless and necessary. I said yes. I committed to the project, knowing full well it would stretch me to my limits. And it did. There were late nights, emergency calls, and moments when I thought I'd bitten off more than I could chew. But I learned. Fast. I figured out how to manage client expectations, how to delegate parts of the work to freelancers, and how to set boundaries without losing the client's trust. That project wasn't perfect. I made mistakes. I stumbled. But I delivered. And that delivery opened doors I hadn't even dreamed of. I realized that sometimes you don't need to be ready, you just need to be willing to try. The lesson: opportunity doesn't wait for perfection. It knocks at the door when you're still fumbling with the keys. You can choose to hide, or you can open the door and step inside. I stepped inside. Up until that point, I was a one-person show. Every email, every invoice, every training session, I did it all myself. The freelancer juggling act was exhausting, but it was mine. After that big project, something changed. The workload increased. Clients started asking for more. I realized I couldn't keep doing everything alone if I wanted to grow. So I faced a new challenge. How do you build a team when you've never managed anyone before? At first, I tried to do it all myself, thinking it would save time and money. Spoiler, it didn't. I made rookie mistakes, hiring the wrong people, trying to micromanage every detail, not communicating clearly. I learned that managing a team isn't just delegating tasks. It's about trust, clarity, and leadership. Slowly, I developed a system. I started by hiring one reliable freelancer to help with administrative work. That freed me up to focus on client work and business development. Then I brought on a part-time trainer who shared my vision and could deliver workshops while I focused on coaching and sales. Building that small team felt like unlocking a new level. I went from being overwhelmed to having bandwidth. More importantly, I went from doing everything to leading. It was terrifying at times, learning to let go, to trust others with my baby, to handle conflict and set expectations. But it was also empowering. I wasn't just running a side hustle anymore. I was building a company. And with that came new responsibilities: payroll, contracts, taxes, And, most challenging of all, being the person others looked up to when things got tough. I made mistakes. I failed. I doubted myself. But every challenge was a lesson. Because being a CEO isn't about having all the answers. It's about showing up, learning, adapting, and leading, even when you're scared. That team became my lifeline. They helped me scale. They pushed me to be better. And they turned my dream into a reality. Everything in business feels like a grind until one moment changes everything. 4 months, I was hustling. Small clients, side gigs, late nights, trying to prove myself. But deep down, I knew that landing a big client could be a game changer. Then, out of nowhere, it happened. I got a call from a mid-sized company looking to revamp their entire team training process. They had heard about my work through a referral but were skeptical. Understandably so, I was still relatively new, with a small portfolio. The first meeting was nerve-wracking. I spent hours preparing, rehearsing every word, every slide. When I walked into their office, I felt the weight of every no and every rejection I'd faced. But I pushed through. I shared my story, how I had lived the struggles I was trying to solve. I showed them how my tailored training could not just improve skills, but boost morale and reduce turnover. They listened. They asked tough questions. And then, to my surprise, they said yes. Landing that first big client wasn't just about the money. It was validation, proof that I was onto something real. That project pushed me to step up my game. I hired more people. I invested in better tools. I refined my programs. And as the project progressed, word spread. More companies started reaching out. Suddenly, I wasn't just a freelancer with a side hustle. I was running a legitimate business. That turning point gave me confidence. It gave me momentum. It gave me a reason to keep pushing forward, even on the hardest days. Because sometimes, all it takes is one big win to change everything. Landing that big client didn't erase the voices in my head. The doubt, the fear, the nagging feeling that maybe I wasn't good enough, that sooner or later, someone would figure out I was a fraud. Imposter syndrome is a sneaky enemy. It creeps in when you're alone in a hotel room after a long day of presentations. It whispers when you wake up at 3 a.m. wondering if you're really cut out for this. I faced moments when I wanted to quit, when the pressure felt unbearable, when comparing myself to seasoned experts made me feel small. But I realized something crucial. Everyone feels this way, even the people who seem confident and unstoppable. The difference is what you do with that feeling. For me, it became a choice. Instead of letting self-doubt paralyze me, I used it as fuel. I talked openly with mentors and peers. I shared my struggles, and I was met with understanding, not judgment. I reminded myself of every win, no matter how small. I celebrated progress over perfection. Most importantly, I focused on my why, the reason I started this journey in the first place. Slowly, the voices lost their power. I started to trust myself more, to own my story and my skills. Imposter syndrome didn't disappear overnight, but it became manageable. And that made all the difference. Because confidence isn't about never doubting yourself. It's about moving forward despite the doubt. After landing that first big client and overcoming my doubts, the business started to grow faster than I had expected. But growth brought its own challenges, growing pains that almost knocked me off course. Suddenly, I wasn't just working with 1 or 2 clients. I was juggling 5, then 10, and sometimes even more. My small team was stretched thin. Processes that worked when we were small suddenly became bottlenecks. Communication broke down, deadlines slipped, and I found myself buried in emails and firefighting instead of building. I realized fast that scaling wasn't just about getting bigger, it was about doing things differently. I had to learn how to delegate effectively, which was harder than I thought. Trusting others with parts of the business I had always controlled felt risky. But holding on too tightly was suffocating growth. I also had to formalize systems, project management tools, standardized training materials, clear client onboarding processes. These weren't sexy or exciting, but they were essential. Financial management became a major headache. Cash flow wasn't always steady, and I had to learn how to budget, plan for slow months, and invest wisely. One of the toughest lessons. Saying no. When you're growing, it's tempting to say yes to every client and opportunity. But not every client was a good fit, and chasing everything led to burnout. I had to learn to focus on the clients and projects that aligned with my vision and values. Through all this, my team was crucial. We held regular meetings to stay aligned, celebrated small wins together, and supported each other when things got tough. These growing pains weren't fun, but they taught me resilience, adaptability, and leadership at a whole new level. Looking back, I'm grateful for the chaos because it forced me to evolve from a solo hustler into a real CEO. As my business grew, I couldn't help but think back to where it all began, my old company. The place I had quit 2 years earlier because of the low salary and lack of growth. At first, it was just a memory, a painful chapter one thought I'd closed. But then, curiosity crept in. What had changed since I left? How was the company doing now? More importantly, what role could I play in this chapter of my life? One day, I found myself driving past their office building. The same gray walls, the same worn-out parking lot. The familiar sights brought a mix of nostalgia and resolve. I reached out to a former colleague, someone I still trusted and respected, and asked how things were going. To my surprise, the company was struggling. Employee turnover was high, morale was low, and leadership was stretched thin. That old problem I'd noticed, the lack of real training and development, was still there. Then an idea hit me. What if I could help them? Not just out of nostalgia, but because I knew the pain points intimately. I understood the people. I understood the gaps. I pitched them a plan, a comprehensive training and leadership development program tailored specifically to their culture and challenges. They were skeptical at first, but after some conversations and presentations, they agreed to a pilot program. Walking back into that building felt surreal. I was no longer the frustrated employee. I was the consultant bringing solutions. The pilot program was a success. Teams responded well. Managers felt more confident. Turnover slowed. It wasn't just about business, it was about closure. About proving to myself that quitting that job wasn't the end but the beginning. And maybe, just maybe, buying that company one day wasn't such a crazy idea after all. After the success of the pilot program at my old company, what started as a simple consulting gig quickly turned into something much bigger. The leadership team began to see me not just as an outsider brought in for training, but as a potential partner who understood their challenges deeply. One conversation led to another. The CEO and I began discussing how to make long-term changes, not just quick fixes. I shared my vision for sustainable growth through people development, improved communication, and a culture shift. They listened. But then, unexpectedly, the CEO mentioned something that caught me off guard. Have you ever thought about what it would be like to own a company like this? I laughed it off at first, thinking it was just a rhetorical question. But over the next few weeks, the idea lingered. The more we talked, the more they hinted that the company might be open to a change in ownership. The current owners were considering selling due to ongoing struggles and the desire to move on. That was when things got real. Negotiating to buy a company, especially one you once worked for, is a delicate dance. It's emotional, strategic, and sometimes downright nerve-wracking. I had to learn how to evaluate the business honestly, looking beyond the numbers at the people, processes, and potential. I consulted with financial advisors, lawyers, and mentors to understand what buying a company really meant. It wasn't just about money, it was about responsibility and risk. The negotiation process involved multiple meetings, offer revisions, and candid conversations. I had to prove I wasn't just a consultant with a dream. I was a serious buyer with a plan. It wasn't easy. There were moments when deals seemed to fall apart, moments of doubt, and countless hours of paperwork. But I stayed focused. Because this wasn't just a business transaction, it was a full-circle moment. From quitting because of low salary to stepping up as a potential owner, it felt like the culmination of everything I'd worked for. And when the deal finally closed, I realized something powerful. Sometimes, walking away is the first step toward owning the whole journey. Closing the deal and officially becoming the owner of the company was surreal. I went from quitting over a low salary to running the very business I once left behind. The reality of the responsibility hit me fast. This was no longer a side hustle or a consulting gig. This was the real deal. My first days as owner were a whirlwind. I walked through the familiar halls with a new perspective, no longer an employee frustrated by limitations, but the person charged with shaping the company's future. I started by listening. I met with department heads, frontline employees, and the leadership team to understand their perspectives. What was working? What wasn't? What did they hope to see change? It was humbling. I realized that no matter how much I knew, I needed their trust and insights to move forward. Next came tough decisions. I identified inefficiencies that had been overlooked for years. Some processes were outdated, some roles overlapped, and some policies were simply ineffective. I had to make changes, but I also knew I had to balance progress with empathy. I communicated transparently about what needed to change and why. I wanted people to feel involved, not just dictated to. At times, it felt like walking a tightrope, balancing ambition with patience, authority with approachability. The first few weeks were exhausting but invigorating. Every challenge was a lesson. Every conversation, a chance to build culture. I quickly learned that being an owner is less about control and more about leadership. It's about inspiring people to believe in a shared vision and working together to make it real. Looking back, those first days set the tone for everything that came after. And they reminded me why I had taken this leap in the first place. Taking over the company was one thing, but transforming its culture, that was the real challenge. When I walked back in as the owner, it was clear that the company's culture was toxic in many ways. Employees felt undervalued, communication was poor, and trust was at an all-time low. The kind of environment that kills creativity and drives talent away. I knew I had to act fast. Culture isn't something you can change overnight. It's the sum of countless small actions, decisions, and attitudes. But it starts with leadership. I began by setting a new tone, one of openness, respect, and accountability. We held town halls where everyone could speak openly. I encouraged honest feedback and made it clear that every voice mattered. Next, we introduced programs to recognize and reward employees, not just for results but for living our values. We revamped onboarding to ensure new hires felt welcomed and supported from day one. Training wasn't just about skills, it was about mindset. Slowly, we saw shifts. Teams started collaborating instead of competing. People felt safer sharing ideas and concerns. Morale improved. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks and resistance. Changing culture is messy. But every step forward was worth it. Because a thriving culture isn't just a nice-to-have. It's the foundation of sustainable success. Today, I'm proud to say the company is not only growing financially, but also becoming a place where people want to work and grow. And that transformation, it started with a simple belief: people come first. As I sit here today, reflecting on everything, from quitting over a low salary to owning the company, I'm overwhelmed by how much has changed. The journey has been anything but easy, but every twist and turn taught me invaluable lessons. First, I learned that sometimes walking away is necessary. It's not about giving up, it's about recognizing your worth and seeking environments where you can thrive. Second, success doesn't come overnight. It's built brick by brick through hard work, resilience, and the willingness to learn from failure. Third, your network is gold. The people you know, trust, and collaborate with will lift you higher than any solo effort ever could. Fourth, leadership is a journey, not a destination. It means constantly growing, adapting, and showing up even when you don't have all the answers. Fifth, culture is everything. A company's heartbeat lies in its people, and investing in them pays dividends far beyond profits. Finally, owning a business is more than a title. It's a responsibility to yourself, your team, and your customers. Looking forward, I'm excited. There are new challenges on the horizon, bigger goals to chase, and more lives to impact. But I also know that no matter what happens, the lessons I learned on this journey will guide me. To anyone watching this, if you're feeling stuck or undervalued, remember this: your story isn't over. Sometimes, the hardest decision, like walking away, can be the first step to something extraordinary. Thank you for following along. Here's to the next chapter.